Good morning, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ben Park, and welcome to Going Overtown's What's the Deal with the COVID vaccine? We have had a 5-part series. This is the last of our series, so I thought we'd go out with a bang. So welcome, Commissioner Jeffrey Watson. How are you today?
Good morning. How are you doing?
Thank you for agreeing to join us. We'll start and open the door by letting you share a little bit about yourself, who you are, like we don't know, but who you are and what you do.
I am the City of Miami District Commissioner 5 representative on the City of Miami's commission.
Okay.
And that means a lot of things to a lot of people.
Okay. Well, yeah, that might be a mouthful right there. What does that mean to you?
You know, it's interesting. What it means is it means being able to be a voice and representative at the table for a wide variety of interests in my district, and a continued drumbeat of people in the city who think this because I look like I do, I'm their commissioner as well.
Right. Exactly. So let's start with the reason why we're here. Did you take the vaccine? Are you a recipient of the COVID vaccine?
Yes.
Okay. And what made you make that decision?
I made that decision because I almost died. I made that decision because I thought it was important. I made that decision because we have terrible health outcomes. Mm-hmm. And to that end, earlier on, the people who are most vulnerable, probably in a higher percentage of the population, were people in my community. And so it was important to make sure that we had the best information possible in order to protect ourselves. And so you could talk about things futuristically, but there were a number of seniors who called, 70 years old senior, who called and said, if this gives me 10 years, then I'm better off taking it than worrying about what's going to happen 15 years down the road. And so it was important, as I know we have a sketchy history with medical research, if you will, that it was important to at least have people go talk to people who they trust and talk to people who give them medical advice on everything else, and then allow them to help you make a decision that might be in your best interest. Because early on, when you looked at what was going on, clearly there was a real lack of knowledge, even in the medical profession, about what should take place. When I went in day 2 or 3, it got pretty bad. And the doctor indicated that he would not put me on a respirator because I'd have a 17% chance of living. Right? Ironically, because he deemed me to be halfway healthy, he used other methods in order to bring me back on the brink of, saying goodbye. But when you think about, and if you go back to what was happening last year, early March, April, May, it was this whole rush to get respirators. But at the end of the day, it was the worst thing to happen.
Right.
For someone who was affirmed and someone who had respiratory illnesses, and it was the worst thing that could happen was to be on a respirator. And so, thank goodness, time had passed, and I had opportunity to just look at things and being a student, if you will, of Dr. Fauci, from experiences with my family wife. And so that allowed me to at least listen to him, block out all the other noise, and make the decision I made.
I mean, you tap on something actually that I was going to. You were not sitting in this commissioner seat when this first broke.
No, I was not. You're right.
So there was, as you mentioned, in your district, a great audience of people that were impacted by this, probably more so than any other district in Miami-Dade County. So when you got into this seat, what have you learned? What are some of the things that you learned, both through your experience, because I've learned something today I wasn't aware you was a patient of COVID, but also in what's happening in your district with regards to the pandemic?
Well, with regards to the pandemic, it was an occurrence of a lifetime, an occurrence of a generation, and we were not prepared for it. And so people have been talking about for the last maybe 6 years, 2015 thereabouts, to be prepared for this, because it is bound to happen. If you remember Ebola, it was very localized. SARS, a lot of things have happened to say, okay, it's coming. It's coming. It's like here with us when you have the preparedness that we go through for a hurricane, and all of a sudden it doesn't hit, and everybody gets mad. But at the end of the day, it's better to be prepared than not. Right. And so, from that perspective, the pandemic was a one-off, hopefully one-off occurrence that affected everybody. So it didn't matter. You couldn't buy your way out. You really couldn't sleep your way through it. And so essentially, you had to now, at least in some respect, follow the things that were going on and you were being advised to do, even if it didn't seem like it made a lot of sense. The truth is, most did not know, because you can be prepared, but until it comes, then you really don't know what's going on. And so clearly, even for guys with medical, my doctor, for example, did not see his parents and his family for a year. And he didn't, because he did not want to be labeled as the one who gave anybody the virus. And so it's sort of thing where it likens back to where we're not. And that's what I saw most in the pandemic. And where we're not is we're not prepared. We're not prepared on many levels that we should be in order to thrive in an environment that we exist in.
And so yes, you're right. We were not prepared, but these have been conversations that we've been having for years now. People don't have enough health care in our district, don't have enough health care because of lack of jobs, lack of income. You got to choose between eating and insurance, which one wins out. I really think the pandemic brought that to light. So what's the plan from here? Are we really thinking through a strategic plan to get members and residents of our district up and ready for all things?
Well, look, I think that unfortunately we're in a dysfunctional government environment. And so we don't necessarily get the plan, if you will. And the irony of that is the plan is no better than the planner, him or herself. And so from that perspective, you need people who understand the dynamics of what possibly can come about in order to be able to plan for a better outcome if it does. And so we're not the beneficiary of a lot of great planners. And so consequently, we're always reacting to what's going on as opposed to somewhat being out in front of what may happen. And so that's the unfortunate irony for us. As I have sat now for 6-7 months, as I've looked around and tried to understand, we have a very limited scope with respect to the city of Miami, except because we're in the heart of the environment geographically. Everything now emanates from us, even if it's from a perception perspective, it does. The big challenge is the homeless problem. Well, geographically, they're in the city, but we're not really tasked to deal with the issues relative to the homeless. And so we have to do the best we can in every respect, or it will always look like we're the bad guys because we only deal with the outcome. They're there, arrest them, put them away. And that's not what's necessary in order to help with the situation. And so clearly, for us as a community, for us as a district, I have a wide swath of interest. Look, they're selling lots in the eastern part of my district, $3-4 million a lot. And yet they're selling lots in the western part of my district for 100,000. And so I have to now, open up and see everybody's perspective on an issue, because clearly what may be of concern in one part is not necessarily concern in another part. And so it's been very, for someone who's dealt with government for many, many years, it's been interesting. It's been fun. It's good to take on challenges beyond what you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to do is the basic proverbial for city of Miami elected officials. fire, police, garbage, zoning. That's us. And yet, even when someone who came down, a group of people who were being evicted from a rental property on the water came down, and guess what? They wanted the same sort of considerations that some people who are on the river. These folks were given 60 days. The folks on the river were given 3 days. And yet, you understand?
Yeah.
and yet it doesn't matter where you are on the economics ladder. You still want the same sort of respectable responses to your issue. And so
that's an important issue right there. I mean, I get that there are levels of urgency. Unfortunately, right now we're looking at what's going on with Surfside, and my heart goes out to the families. But so how do we? I, for lack of a better way to put it, level the playing field. So there is an expectation that we will all get the same types of services and concerns. As you know, the vaccine sites were provided in many of your district communities. The state has removed most of those, which now is going to be a bit of a challenge for those folks in your district who don't have the same access to transportation, same access to opportunity. What's the plan? Are there plans?
Look, let me also say this about Surfside, because clearly that's a tragic incident. And our guys, Surfside has no infrastructure for that. Our guys are over there, our guys being our fire and rescue folks, some of our definitely our fire and rescue folks over there. They're on 12-hour shifts with the county and the city, because Surfside has no infrastructure for that, right? But there again, right? There was a report done 3 years ago now that we're being told, and it was supposed to be some things to take place that didn't take place. And just like anybody else, everybody errs on the side of, well, not right now because I'm going to do something else, and then look what happened. Right? And so that becomes a problem. As it relates to the vaccine itself, it's one of those sort of things where you make different projections. Look, the projections on vaccinations, and I didn't know until this for me, there has been what they call anti-vaxxers, and people just didn't want to take vaccines. That goes back to time immemorial. That's not new. You're not going to have 100% participation in a vaccination effort. You're just not. And it makes it even worse when people continue to believe some of the misinformation that goes around is going to be even higher. Luckily, the president said 70%. It was always projected to be 65. 35% of people will not take it. Okay, what you say, what you do. You drop in front of the house, you're not going to take it, right? And so he's short of 70, but kudos from 60 up to 70, 65 and some change. He's just about where it's going to probably be, notwithstanding. The unfortunate part about the 35%, who makes that up? And I hate to think that we make up more of the 35% than we should, because we do have bad health indicators and outcomes, and consequently, people who are in that position now wind up being more subject to being attacked aggressively, and that's an unfortunate irony. I just talked to someone I know, haven't talked to him, talked to a friend, we know him mutually, and this gentleman will probably never been vaccinated, except now not only is he sick, very, so if his wife's sick, very. But he's one of those guys running around that, they're not going to get it because some macho craziness or whatever the case may be. And yet he's very, very ill at this point. Hopefully he's young enough and healthy enough to survive. But you never know. I talked to someone.
Where do we fall in that 35, meaning the district? Are we
in terms of
a large part of our district falling into that 35%? Have you looked at?
Well, we don't get those numbers. When those numbers were last given to me, must have been, and I looked at something the other day, was last given to me, it was probably about 2.5, 3 months ago, maybe. And at that point, that there was a article that was being, let's say negative, article chastising the effort itself. I had done an interview before and talked to state people before. And unfortunately, for all of us, some things are, a lot of things have to go through the state. And the state is unforgiving, dealing with people who are not in their support base, if you will. And so from that perspective, we were able to now jump the line, if you will, early on. The city paid for its own efforts to go out and do vaccinations in areas that were necessary. And although the countywide, our numbers were not that great among African-American communities, my numbers in the district were higher because we had that opportunity. And so I went to places we call our senior community. We went into doing, we had 3 different efforts. We had an effort that we went to someone's house who were homebound. We went directly. We reached out to as many people as we could find who were homebound, asked people who check on people to allow us to now talk to them, and they all were inclined to be vaccinated. And that was the first effort. The second part of that is we had a mobile unit, and we set up many mobile stations, if you will. And we did that in order to make sure that people now can come at the center, they can in fact now be vaccinated. And then as the ages went down, the state did more. So then when I spoke to background on the state's effort, I mean, I think it was important to at least say that not reaching people was not necessarily an option. To say if you can target everybody that you need to put yourself in office, then you should be able to target those same people and find out who needs to be vaccinated, and at least give them the option to do so. I just think if you're a public servant, at some point you move beyond being a partisan figure and now being a figure that have to take care of everybody that you serve, right? And so from that vantage point, we had a higher number in the city, in the city among African Americans than it was countywide, because most of what the county was doing was directed by the state. We happened to jump out of line when it came down to us now being recipients of the state's effort directly. Then it may have changed a little bit. But here's the other side of it as well. And I wish somebody would call for it, but you know, these people in office, they really don't even know what's happening for the most part. There were 3 companies during the course of the time that I was laying up in the hospital, finding out, and my doctor said, look, Commissioner, a friend of mine was bragging that it was. And so then I thought about it, because I did people, and I thought, well, wait a minute, this is not state workers doing vaccinations. So who is this? And then I realized it wasn't state workers, it was private contractors. And what we don't know is that they're private contractors that do a lot of government work. Under the auspices, you just automatically think it's the government worker. It's not. And so there was in the span of about 16 months, there were 3 companies that made about $200 million, right, in the business of healthcare. We're not in the business of healthcare. And so consequently, we have less participation and less access to healthcare. When our folks leave our community and have to go to Miami Beach, leave our community, have to go down to Kendall, leave our community, have to go way, just like everything else. When they have to do that now, because we're not in the business of healthcare, right, then you have a lower participation rate than you normally would have. Because of our cultural orientation, we've not always been good to our health, and consequently, what we eat and take in, and what have you, that now has caused us over the years to have the sort of outcomes based on now analysis of certain foods and what have you. It has caused us to be in the situation we're in. And so a lot of that is based on information and not ignoring your doctor and doing the best you can trying to take care of yourself.
So, okay, so you are in a district that has a community redevelopment agency. Now, let me say this. I'm fully aware that the Community Redevelopment Agency is not responsible for people's health. That is not what they fund at all.
Well, but listen. See, that's not accurate, because
Okay.
part of part of its mission, part of why it exists, okay, as a designation, you have to explain a lot of deficiencies in the environment. And
Right.
part of a component of that is health outcomes. Okay.
Okay.
Factors leading to bad health outcomes helps you become designated as an agency. And so that's not necessarily, correct. And
So
so,
now that we know this, then what are we talking about at this point about trying to really get this district
well,
healthier? Are
well,
there
the
plans?
whole advent of ridding the area of slum and blight
Mhm.
takes on the umbrella of that, right? And so now, what does that mean? Getting rid of abandoned buildings, getting rid of vacant buildings, getting rid of the physicality of what causes slum and blight, and then getting about the business of trying to replace that or upgrade those areas so that you don't have brownfields like you have on 7th Avenue. You don't have abandoned buildings like you have on 3rd Avenue and 18th Street. You don't have those sort of things. You don't have abandoned lots where you have trash thrown and then sooner or later they're overgrown, sooner or later rats. You don't have the sort of issue that we're trying to deal with the homelessness. All of those things bring us to the point of now having to do more in order to change the outcomes of the people, lifting the income levels, the construction projects, getting people certified for training. All those things help lower the rate and physicality of slum and blight. There's a report.
What about clinics? Would you invest in off-site or on-site clinics that could one, help with vaccines as we continue, because they're already talking about boosters, and then help folks meet their healthcare needs so
Well,
that if this thing comes back or strains come back, we're not.
Well, I mean, unlike places setting up something now to deal with that in another part of the district. But just for example, the three brothers that were on last week, I don't remember which show. I don't know if it was Oprah show or the other lady's show. The first urgent care clinic they had, I guess, in Chicago. Here's the thing: in the CRA, there's a Jefferson Reeves clinic right smack in the middle of the community. Are people using it? And I think we had some sort of partnership mildly. I say that mildly because I'm not sure, but I believe we did have partnership with respect to bring about the clinic. The clinic is there in order to give better access to the things basic level that the community needs. So unless it's some sort of trauma experience, you don't have to go over to Jackson. You can go to the clinic. Is the clinic operating based on expectations? That I couldn't tell you at this point. But clearly, we have that where it's close and it's accessible. Was there a vaccine site set up there? I don't believe so. A site by the state was set up on 15th Street and about 1st Avenue. Jesse Trice did some activations in the community as well. But that site was set up to help with what? Those outcomes, make healthcare more accessible. Go there instead of schlepping across over to Jackson, where it's real more cumbersome. It's a whole lot of other things you have to deal with, and so that was set up to do that. So yes, we try to provide it, and then hope that in its efforts, people get the word and message and know that it exists for their use and it's accessible to them.
Will that be something maybe that maybe some more marketing or some kind of support in that way to help disseminate the information that people are aware that is there? Because I think that's one of the challenges that some people in the community don't really know that the Jefferson Reeves Clinic or Jesse Trice is there. So
yeah, the irony of that is that we probably should know a whole lot of. We know that's there. That we should know a lot more about that's there. That we don't know that it exists. And so it's a combination of who's there running the facility and ensuring that now they have the use so that they can continue to now as a institution, Jackson Memorial, invest in it so they can continue to make it state of the art and accessible so that people feel comfortable about going there, and that would be a good thing. Yeah.
So are you planning to, since the site is gone, the state site is gone now, are you planning to reactivate the mobilizations that you've done earlier? Or have you thought through, or are you working through a plan of ensuring, again, because I heard today we're talking about maybe a booster shot in the fall. Are you now talking about, what's the next plans, or are there organizations out there doing that, helping to support that effort?
There again, the booster, the booster shot is new to me, but I am working with a group that has all of the shots now, and we're talking about what we're going to start doing in August so that the kids are prepared. And I'm doing something with Calvin Hughes and this medical group out of Virginia, so that we can now ensure that we give as much access to our kids going back to school with a number of healthcare items, and we're going to do that probably, I think, in mid-August. So we're preparing for that, which then will take on a health initiative that I'm trying to do. Just because, just like I said, I mean, it's a all the way around. Even if you're not tasked with it, if you see it, then you should now bring it forth in order to make sure that people have the ability to have their sight checked, their teeth checked, the basic things to find out whether or not they're prepared to now go through school and don't have medical problems that go undetected because now they're not with a health plan, or they're not getting health insurance, or they don't have that. I know that exists. I don't need anybody to tell me. I can't tell you specific numbers, but I do know that a lot of us don't have what's necessary in order to check. And so when you start out every year, I used to start out every year, my mom and going to the doctor, get a checkup. Well, that doesn't exist for all of us. And I know that. So I'm not waiting for somebody to tell me that it doesn't exist. I know it doesn't. And so Angels for Humanity, I'm going to partner with to do something. And to that end, if it gets bigger than what we planned, then we're going to make sure we provide it for as many kids that we can.
Okay. And definitely I'll send you some names of some people that are also looking to do some pop-up sites as well. Maybe it can be a great
most definitely
grand effort.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, we've interviewed a couple on this show. One last question, and because I know you're busy, you got things to do. What are you hearing from the residents? I mean, I'm pretty sure you've been out and about. We're in this quagmire now where you may wear a mask, you may not wear a mask, depending on where you are and what you're doing. Can we hug? Can we not hug? What are you learning from the residents in your district about their concerns around what happened with the pandemic? What was lost, what they feel was lost, what they feel was gained, what we could do better, and how are you taking that into account as you're thinking?
Well, I mean, I think that there's still an uneasiness with everyone regarding what's the real issues at hand. Clearly, for most of the residents in my district, a vast majority are still uneasy about, quote unquote, the vaccine. And clearly, because there's not a lot of talk about it anymore, they have moved on. And so some people culturally will do other things to protect themselves, but still won't do a vaccine. And there's some who believe in a certain category, they have to protect themselves because they are of the category that, they have, they're more vulnerable. And so they are now going to make sure that they are protected. But as we roll out of this, I'm finding that people are trying to, it's like the plane, they're taxiing and they're waiting to lift off. And for some, it's a lift that has started. And for others, they're still taxiing, trying to figure out when they're going to be able to take off. And so that's the biggest thing. Do you wear your mask after you've been vaccinated? Some people say yes, you wear your mask because you don't know who else is not. And remember, it's not 100% efficacy with respect to the vaccines, but high enough to protect you. And so, yes, people can probably get it after they've been vaccinated. That's something that I've heard. But people have begun to try to now move forward and regroup, if you will, figure out how to operate in a new normal, if you will. And so that means some people are still wearing masks, regardless of what anybody says. That means people are still using hand sanitizer, regardless of what anybody says, because they want to now make sure that they don't have the sort of issues that come about when you don't protect yourself. Still washing hands. People still doing the bump elbow, maybe with hand, which one.
I did that last night.
People, it's just like, what's the shuffle? Okay, how you doing? So that's still happening because people, don't know, even if they've been vaccinated, they don't know, and they just want to, they're trying to figure out. And I guess sooner or later, we'll get to the point where it is beyond, it's behind us, and we're doing things more akin to what we used to than not. But it will not be the same going forward, just because it's just too much now took place under uncertainty, and from that perspective, it's not going to be the same.
So what are you saying to your residents? And I promise this is the last question. What are you saying to your residents? Actually, I might not have. There's somebody that sent a question. Okay.
Well, that's good. Look, what I'm saying is, if you have not taken it, still talk to someone who you trust, and review what you should with them. Nobody has kind of gotten the heebie-jeebies of falling out on the floor and start foaming at the mouth. And so, from that perspective, maybe it's not going to be what you were told by Mama Joe or Billy Bo or whatever, and you should now make sure that you are vaccinated, as we hear about a new strand that's coming about, right? And so from that vantage point, just continue to do some of the things that we've been doing all along. And, for a lot of us, we were always brought up to wash your hands, but, and then keep your hands out your eyes and keep your hands out your mouth, hands dirty. And that never resonated more than it did in the last year and a half, because that was something that we've always taught that we never did. And all of a sudden now, like, really, all you have to do is wash your hands, and don't put my hands in the eyes, and don't put but all those things, that's the thing. Since time memorial, there's some basic things if you just hold true to, then you'll be all right. But we don't. I think that's what happened to me, is with my hands, fingers, mouth, and then oh yeah, okay, I'll go wipe it. Well, So I think all of those things now loom more large in our lives than they did before, even though we were taught all the time. Someone said to me the other day, they said, look, before Airbnb was the Green Book. Oh man, but if the Green Book people would have known that, man, they'd be billionaires now, not Airbnb. So it is interesting that happens.
It all comes back around. It all comes back around.
So the basicness of that. Now, when you roll forward, and that was 100 years ago, maybe 60s and 50s. When you roll forward, look now. Here's some little guy did an app. Now all of a sudden, app, and now he can tell you can stay in people's houses and have a more safe and comfortable way to stay than going into a hotel. And look, he's a billionaire. So it's the sort of things that we tend not to want to pay attention to, that we've already learned that will help us in a lot of respects, that now come back, and all of a sudden now it's like, oh, that is valuable.
Innovation.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly.
I know my grandmama told me to wash my hands.
Exactly. Wash your hands. Wash it. Get back in there, wash it.
You better not sit on the table when you wash your hands.
Right. So yeah, if we do that and heighten, because how things go. Once you get a little bit further out, you don't want to be talking about the pandemic. We'll be talking about something else.
That's true.
You don't want to be talking about all the pledges they made last summer. They'll be talking about something else. And so that's kind of where we are now. Some more people now are thanking me for making sure they had access to it than not. That's generally what I hear more so than anything.
Okay. So if they feel like they need it, they just want to know that it's available.
Yeah. Okay. And we're still passing out masks at events. We're still passing out hand sanitizers at events, just to keep in sync with what we should keep in sync with at this point.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much for agreeing to do this. I think this has been a wealth of information. I really also feel like, someone in your seat is definitely a good person that can guide and inform and help people make decisions based on kind of what you do and what you're doing for the district. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for all you do for the district. This is our final show. We thank everyone that tuned in and is going to watch. We actually will be premiering all of these shows again on YouTube next week. But if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to Going Overtown. We want to keep you informed as you get more information coming online. Commissioner, we want to make sure we share it with the audience. So please, please feel free to share with
Sure.
us what's going on. We'll make sure we get it out.
Sure.
So thank you so much, y'all. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.